I've had text messages through, Facebook and Instagram, and from nurses and people that I don't even know saying, "Thank you for writing this. Thank you for educating." Like, this is something I never learned in grad school.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and today I welcome Vanessa Abraham. Vanessa is a certified speech-language pathologist, a mother, a wife, and she spent over 15 years helping children find their voices. But in 2019, Vanessa experienced her own medical emergency, which altered her path of her life and her career. And we're going to learn about that today, and I'm certainly a lot more. But first of all, Vanessa, thank you so much for being on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and tell you my story.
Well, I'm ready to start here. And as a matter of fact, we start the podcast with a segment I call it In Your Own Words. So I'd love the audience to learn a little bit more about you.
All right. So as you said, I'm a wife, mother, speech pathologist. My speech pathology degree began about 13 years ago, where I graduated from NAU, Northern Arizona University. Prior to that, I worked as a speech pathology assistant, so I have more than just those 13 years under my belt. However, in 2019 is where the road of being a speech pathologist kind of came to a head with being a patient in the ICU requiring speech therapy services. So again, that was in 2019. I went to bed at night thinking, everything was fine. I just put my daughter to bed and woke up the next day and I thought, I'm not feeling good. Something feels very off. I have a really weird case of the flu or a cold. Something was just off. Never in my entire life had I ever had anything more than a head cold or, flu-like symptoms. So I figured I need to rest. I need to just take a few days off. But it didn't just go away. It progressively kept getting worse to the point as a speech pathologist, I went to work without a voice, and that was really bizarre. Yeah, just very breathy vocal quality. I was getting a lot of nausea, body aches. And then within 7 days from that initial onset, I woke up in the middle of the night about 1 a.m., fell out of bed, and my husband looked at me and he goes, "You're not getting any better. We need to go to emergency." And that's where it all began.
Well, good thing your husband said that right there, because sometimes we could all be a little stubborn and go, no, let's just give it till the morning. But that was pretty much right then. You went right into the hospital, and that's where, like you said, the story kind of begins. So where does it go from there?
So at that point in time, I was declining pretty rapidly. I was seeing double at that point. Slowly, this virus that was invading my brain was demyelinating the nerves through my brainstem and spinal cord. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that I'm not feeling good, and I was slowly getting to the point where I wasn't able to move my upper body, my limbs. My neck was getting real stiff. Um, and doctors ran MRIs, CT scans, and they gave me all sorts of different diagnoses, anything from MS to neuromyelitis optica, where they told my husband that she's going to die of a slow paralysis. It was a scary journey, and I don't really remember much from that point on, because that's when the paralysis really took over and they started sedating me more, and that's when I got intubated. And that's also the point in time where, as a speech pathologist, I started to use augmentative communication. So eye gaze, which was a shock for me as a speech pathologist, waking up and I couldn't talk. I was intubated. And I couldn't move my fingers to point to letters or pictures or anything like that. So when I woke up and there was an eye gaze device in front of me where I could look at the words yes or no, or look at letters to tell people I was in pain, was unreal.
You had been, how do I say it, coaching people in that, or to a certain extent. What did that experience, I'm kind of cutting to the chase a little bit here, but I'm just so curious about your story, because you had helped so many people overcome what you're going through. What was it like for you to go through it, and what was going through your mind?
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. As you said, that's what I do for a living. I would give students augmentative communication devices, things like iPads, iPads with text-to-speech on them, picture cards to communicate. Kids with autism will use picture symbols for communication, that they'll give you a picture of a hamburger indicating they want a hamburger. And for me to wake up and realize that's where I'm at right now terrified me. I was in 2 different ICUs, and the second ICU I was at, I'll never forget too, kinda opening my eyes, and through the curtain walks a speech pathologist to assess me for voice and swallowing. And I looked at her. I thought, this woman is approximately my age-ish. She's young, childbearing years. She's looking at me thinking that could be me. I'm looking at her thinking what's going on in her mind, evaluating another speech pathologist in the bed. I looked at her and I just cried. I couldn't hold back. I was scared. I was terrified. I knew as a speech pathologist that I was not in good condition. I knew I couldn't move. I knew I couldn't talk. I knew that I was being tube fed, or not tube fed at that point. I had the NG tube, the tube through my nose where they were feeding me. And I knew all these signs were not good.
And I read too, one of the things that played on your mind was not holding your daughter.
Yes.
So you went through a lot of emotional as well as the physical. How was it to overcome that I know it's been a few years, but still, that's not an easy path. And I don't think it is to this day, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's not. Emotionally, I worried about her. I was grieving, laying there in that bed thinking, this could be it. I don't know what my diagnosis was. Nobody could figure it out. They were sending tests off to Mayo Clinic, CDC. They had no idea. They just said it could be this, it could be this, it could be this, or it could be this. And I just laid in the bed, absolutely profoundly depressed, worrying about her future. What's her future going to be like without a mom? Will I ever hold my baby again? Will I ever see her grow up? Will I see her get married? Is this it? Am I going to die of paralysis like the doctor said?
Was there a time while you were going through this where you could hear and you were cognizant, but maybe people didn't realize you were there mentally?
I was cognitively intact, knew everything that was going on 95% of the time. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, because I knew how bad I was, and that increased my anxiety. So the team, my medical professionals knew I was very anxious. They knew I wanted to see my baby. They knew I wanted to get out of there. They knew that a week ago I was fine and now I'm here. And that just made me so anxious, and they kept having to give me so much medication to calm me down because I was panicked.
As time progressed and you've gone back, let me ask you that. I'm going to go back. How long did it take you to get your own speech back?
I was probably without functional communication for 3 weeks to a month. Eventually I progressed. Okay, let me take you back now. So I started off with the eye gaze. That was when, I was really rapidly declining, where they intubated me, couldn't talk, was using eye gaze. And then as things started to come around within a week, I gained more functioning of my fingers. And that's when I was able to, they gave me a piece of paper with an alphabet on it. And I would just type. It was like a QWERTY keyboard, but on paper. And I could type words. Well, the anxiety in me, I was typing really, really, really fast. And my medical professionals, my husband, they wouldn't be able to track what I was saying. So I had to go really slow, PAIN, to say pain. Or when I wanted to say a full sentence and advocate for myself, it took time. And often they couldn't keep up with me. So therefore, my frustration was elevated. Their frustration was elevated. But we had to just be patient with each other. My doctor, too, he's just like, okay, we're going to be patient. Can you say that again? And I would type the sentence again. So it was very slow. So after that, as a speech pathologist, I thought, oh my gosh, this is 2019. I can type on a phone. Somebody give me my phone. I want to download a text-to-speech app. So my fingers were working. I wasn't able to move my arm, but at least this part was working. So I went on there and just typed in free text-to-speech app. So I downloaded a text-to-speech, and I'll never forget when my husband and doctor walked in. I had my phone out and I text-to-speech them, and they felt like, "Oh my gosh, this is a huge breakthrough. She can talk to us with text-to-speech and not this alphabet board that was so slow." So then after that, um, they wanted to start trialing this thing called a passy-muir valve, and the valve is something that goes on your tracheostomy that allows you to phonate, allows you to make voice. Yeah, and beautiful technology, but extremely hard to use for me because of the nature of my disease. It was very exhausting. The first time, all I was able to do was go, "Ugh," and then I had to take it off because it took that much force and that much energy. And it probably took 2 or 3 days before I could actually tolerate it for 5 minutes. It was that hard to talk. It took a couple weeks before I was able to actually use it 24 hours a day and communicate on a daily basis, but it took a lot of effort, a lot of work to use that. And eventually the tracheostomy, I was decannulated, it was removed, and I was able to talk normally without any type of assistive equipment. However, because of my vocal cords, there was so much damage to them from the nerve demyelination, the quality of my voice changed. The pitch and the quality was a little bit deeper than what it felt normally to me. Since then, it's gotten a lot better. But just because of the paresis of the vocal cords, they're very weak. So it was quite a journey. I've used every form of communication, I can officially say.
Well, did that enhance your lived experience? How did that change your professional life and how you maybe coach others?
I first and foremost look at their mental health because I experienced some significant depression through the whole thing, significant anxiety. And beforehand, I'm not going to say that I took it, how do I say this? I didn't take it as seriously as I do now. I knew it was important to address people's mental health, and being trauma-informed therapist is always a very important thing. But now it supersedes everything for me because if that patient in the bed or that student that comes through your office door is depressed and anxious, not wanting to live another day, then what good is the therapy? We need to be addressing their mental health, making them feel hopeful, giving them reason to live till tomorrow, and that will help their willingness to participate in the therapy sessions. Because, like I said, I was on that other side, and I was like, what good are all these therapy appointments? What good is the shower chair that you sent home so I could take a shower when I don't even want to get out of bed, much less take a shower? My husband had to get me in the shower anyway.
Well, I read that you equated to PTSD with what you went through. So you're still, I'm sure, going through that to a certain extent now?
100%. So when I got out of the ICU, I will never forget this. My parents came home with me that day, and my husband was inside blending up my tube feed because I don't know how much of the book he read, but he blended and made my tube feed. And I was sitting outside on the patio with my parents, just trying to get some fresh air and sobbing. I looked at them and I just said, I feel like I just came home from war. All the sounds, the sights, the images, seeing ambulances drive down the street are all massive triggers for me. And yeah, I still seek help for all of those things. I go to what's called PICS, post-intensive care syndrome. That's the equivalent of, the PTSD, the trauma that we live in the ICU. So I go to support groups for that. That's been really, really helpful because I'm around people in my community, people that understand what I've been through.
And you mentioned your book. I want to go ahead and talk about that now. It's called Speechless. And also remind everyone who I'm speaking with. I'm speaking with Vanessa Abraham. She can be found at anewhealing.com. But the book in particular, yes, let's talk about that because that had to have been quite a undertaking for you to even decide that you want to do it and tell the story the way you did and possibly help others. Can you talk about the inspiration on that?
Yeah, the book took about 4 or 5 years to write. It was hard. I would write a paragraph a page and walk away from it for months, sometimes a year, and just like, I can't do this. It's too traumatic reliving it. The day it launched on January, though, it felt like such a weight was lifted off my shoulders. I felt like, okay, it's out there. My goal, the reason I wanted to write it is I felt such isolation during my journey. People don't know how to talk to people that are not feeling well. They don't know how to talk to people that don't look the same, that are going through depression, anxiety. And I wanted my book to be a source of hope and inspiration for others. I wanted them to feel like, wow, there's somebody else out there experiencing medical trauma, experiencing PTSD, depression, brain fog, confusion. These things are normal after an ICU stay. They're not pleasant, but this is something that's not talked about. As therapists, we are trained to understand trauma in the realm of like abuse, neglect, rape, things like those, which are very important topics that we need to be taking into consideration. But how many, especially after COVID, how many people do we know that were in the ICU fighting for their lives? Everybody knows someone that knows someone that has been through some type of medical care. And this is not an area that's really talked about. So my book is the intent of my book now is to really educate people.
Well, you said you went through spurts where maybe a month you'd write a little bit and then put it down. And what was, as you look back now, what was it in you that just made you finish it? What was it that said, I'm going to do it?
About a year ago, it was a year ago in May, I just looked at my husband. I got to the point where I was angry at myself for not finishing it. I felt guilty for not finishing it. Here I'm going on at this point, it was 5 years, and I thought, this is the guilt of not having it done was weighing on me more than anything. And I'd wake up every day thinking about it, and I would always find an excuse not to finish it. Oh, I gotta go clean the house, or oh, I gotta go to work. And I just got to the point where like this needs to be done. If this could be part of my healing journey moving forward. That's when I went to my husband last year, or it was last spring, and I just said, I need somebody to hold me accountable. This is not going to get done unless I have somebody holding me accountable with deadlines. So I hired a ghostwriter to help me through the process. And I told her last summer, I said, okay, I have 3 months. It needs to be done by August or September. And I said, can we do it? And she goes, absolutely. She goes, I'm going to give you timelines. I'm going to give you deadlines, and I'm going to hold you accountable. And I was up 2:00 in the morning, meeting those deadlines. I was focused. I wanted to get this thing done. I knew that to move forward, to reach my goals, I had to do this. And I did it.
Well, congratulations on that. And I know that was a personal victory, and it certainly feels good. But one of the things I think probably feels pretty good too is when it's available on Amazon. It's pretty much everywhere. Reading some of the reviews, what does that feel like for you when you get the feedback from others about what your book has meant to them?
I cry. I truly cry. A lot of the feedback have come through text too, and I've saved those and I've printed them out just so those days where I get feeling down or doubting myself or that imposter syndrome comes out, I pull up those text messages or those printouts that people send me after reading them, and it reminds me to keep moving forward. I've had text messages through, Facebook and Instagram, and from nurses and people that I don't even know saying, thank you for writing this. Thank you for educating. Like, this is something I never learned in grad school. And that's also something I'm very passionate about, is educating the next cohort of speech pathologists, nurses, doctors, PT, OT, because again, this is just not talked about. It's new information.
And it's more of the mental part you're talking about, right? That's not talked about enough.
Yeah, insurance companies do a wonderful job of sending us home from the ICU with shower chairs, or in my case, I had a suction device, I had a, bedside commode, I had all the equipment for tube feeding, all the cleaning supplies for tube feeding, the cartons of tube feed. And that was wonderful because I needed all that. But at the same time, what good was all that when I wish I didn't survive?
So how does your husband and daughter feel now as they look at you and everything you're doing? They've just got...
My daughter at the time was very young, so she doesn't have a whole lot of memory. I I can tell you I go through days where today was one of them where I just look at her and I think, gosh, I'm so fortunate to be able to see this talent show that she's doing, watching her practice that, and how blessed I am because that may not have happened. I'm so blessed to be able to see her grow and her friendships. And she's at this age now where she's starting to ask deeper level questions. And as emotional it is for me to see her grow up, and it's hard as a parent seeing your child grow up, but at the same time, wow, am I so lucky to be able to be there for her to answer these questions.
Absolutely. I just want to remind everyone again, I'm talking to Vanessa Abraham. She can be found at anewhealing.com. She has a book called Speechless. We just talked about it for the last 20 minutes, and I'm learning more and more as we go along. And you had mentioned something earlier that I wanted to hit on. You talked about some of the self-advocacy as you were going, and to me, it was even something harder for you because you had a problem communicating. But what do you feel like self-advocacy, how does that take form in the healing process when you're in ICU, as an example?
Well, that was hard for me because I really couldn't. I was very, very fortunate. My husband was there by my bedside the whole time. He was, he would come in at 8 and leave at 8 o'clock at night. But a lot of patients don't have that. Especially if we look back at COVID, they were in there all by themselves. A lot of them intubated, unable to communicate, and just had to trust the medical professionals to be doing what they felt was best for you. I will never forget another very vivid memory I have of looking out my ICU doors. They were all glass. And I remember looking out the doors, seeing my team of doctors. They were doing rounds out there, and they had my nurse out there, my husband, the doctors. There was like probably 3 or 4 doctors. It was a teaching hospital, so there was a bunch of students there too. And I remember sitting on the other side of those glass doors, looking out, crying, tears running down my eyes, wishing that not only could I hear what they were saying about me, but wishing I could participate in that. And I'll never forget, my team at UCSD was phenomenal. The doctor looked through those glass windows and looked at me, and this is going to make me very emotional, but he looked through those doors at me and he says, "Would you like to hear what we're saying?" And I just looked at him and I shook my head up and down. I couldn't say yes, but he could sense that, here's a woman that she's very aware. She knows exactly what's going on. And she at least deserves to understand and hear what we're saying. I wanted so badly to talk, but at least I could hear it through my own ear.
What a powerful story. That was very nice of the doctor and the right thing to do in that respect. Vanessa, as you look forward in what you're doing as you continue on, what are you looking forward to accomplish as your life continues next 5 years, let's say?
Big takeaway would be educating, taking my story, educating the next, like I said before, educating the next cohort of speech pathologists, occupational therapists, mental health therapists. I will tell you story after story of seeking out mental health services for myself. And when I'm interviewing the mental health therapists, I often say, well, I'm struggling with this thing called PICS. Have you ever heard of that? Post-intensive care syndrome. Like 100% of them have said, no, can you tell me what that is? And that really crushes my heart because I feel like, how are you going to help me if you've never even heard of this? You don't even know what PICS is. You don't understand medical trauma. Yeah, they may understand PTSD, but PICS. And so again, taking it back to your question, I just want to educate. I want people to hear this story and know that the trauma when loved ones come from home from the ICU, that if they are experiencing brain fog or they're forgetful or, like me, the sight of an ambulance sets them off, this is normal.
I had never heard of that before until I read what you had written. And so thank you for educating me. And I want to remind everyone again, Vanessa Abraham, the author of Speechless. She can be found at a new healing, pardon me, a newhealing.com. And congratulations on everything you're doing and all the good work you're doing, because you're really educating people on the part that's probably the toughest, and that's the mental part. So congratulations on everything you're doing, and thank you so much for being a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share my story.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the We're Not Stumped podcast. I have an ask for everyone that got to this point of the podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe. The reason is simple. These stories need to be shared. It would help it to get out there to the people that really need to hear these stories.